Dominique Ashford was 34 years old, the sixth time she watched her husband pack for his annual sales conference. Terrence kissed her goodbye like he always did. Quick, already somewhere else. He told her the Wi-Fi at the hotel was terrible, that he'd barely have signal, that she shouldn't worry if he went dark for a few days. He had no idea she'd already called that hotel. No reservation. Not this year. Not any year. So Dominique booked her own flight, under her maiden name, and stood at the arrivals gate the next morning watching for his face. He walked out relaxed, unguarded, a man who'd never once imagined being watched. A woman pulled up to the curb, young, familiar. He got in like he'd done it 100 times before. Dominique didn't move, didn't call his name. She simply raised her phone and started recording. Terrence had no idea the trip that always ended in silence was about to end in something else entirely. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The alarm never had a chance. Nikki was already awake at 4:47 a.m., sitting at the small desk in the corner of the home office, her reading glasses low on her nose, 3 spreadsheets open on her laptop screen. A mug of black coffee steamed beside a yellow legal pad covered in her tight, precise handwriting. Column numbers, circled dates, a string of vendor codes that didn't line up the way they were supposed to. Most people looked at numbers and saw math. Nikki looked at numbers and saw stories. Stories with holes in them. She had been hired by a regional logistics company to review 18 months of accounts payable records. Standard stuff, her firm had said, probably a clerical error. But Nikki had found a pattern inside the first hour. 11 invoices, all from the same dummy vendor, all just below the $10,000 threshold that would have triggered an automatic manager review. Whoever did it was careful. They staggered the dates, they rotated the invoice numbers, but they weren't careful enough. She circled the final invoice number and wrote a single word next to it: confirm. By 6:15 a.m., she had a 4-page summary ready for her 9 o'clock call. Over $140,000, systematically skimmed across a year and a half, almost invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for the shape of it. Nikki was always looking for the shape of it. She pulled off her glasses and pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. The house was quiet. Through the office door, she could hear the low hiss of the shower running down the hall. Terrence. Up earlier than usual, which meant he'd already been awake earlier than that, already thinking about leaving. She knew the sounds of this week by heart. It had started 6 years ago, that first October trip. Annual Sales Leadership Conference, he'd called it. A big deal, he'd said. Good visibility with the higher-ups. He came back with branded pens and a hotel keychain and a story about a closing dinner that ran past midnight. The next year, same trip, same week, same conference. Now it was just the conference, a fixture on the calendar as reliable as the weather turning cold. Nikki had stopped asking much about it. What was there to ask? She knew the dates. She put them in her phone. She stocked the fridge for one. She heard the shower cut off. She closed the laptop and went to the kitchen. Terrence came downstairs at 6:40, rolling his carry-on behind him, dressed in the kind of pressed casual that said he cared about being seen. Dark jeans, a fitted slate gray pullover. He looked good. He always looked good for the conference. "You're up early," he said. "Work." She handed him a travel mug. "I made it strong." "Thank you, babe." He took it without looking at her. His phone was already in his other hand, screen tilted just slightly away, the way it always was these days. Not hidden exactly, just angled. She'd stopped mentioning it. He set the mug on the counter and pulled her in for a hug. It was the right shape of a hug. Arms around her shoulders, a brief press of his chin to the top of her head. But it was over before she could settle into it, like a box being checked. "Conference runs through Friday," he said, already moving toward the front door. "I'll text when I land." "Safe flight," she said. He smiled at her, that easy, practiced smile. Then the door closed, and the house was quiet again. She stood in the kitchen for a moment, holding her coffee with both hands. The night before, Sunday dinner at Yvonne's, came back to her in a flash. The clinking of silverware, the smell of pot roast, and Yvonne, passing the rolls with her bright, warm smile, saying to no one in particular, "Nikki, honey, I know it's been a hard couple of years. You just have to be careful not to let yourself go too far in either direction. Terrence always did need a woman who kept herself up." A hard couple of years. Yvonne's tidy little phrase for what had happened. For the baby they'd lost at 5 months. For the 6 months after that when Nikki had barely recognized herself in the mirror. Terrence had laughed softly and changed the subject, and Nikki had smiled and taken a roll she didn't eat. She rinsed her mug now and went back to the office. She wasn't sure what made her open the shared cloud album. She did it the way you press on a bruise, not because it feels good, but because you need to know if it still hurts. The conference photos went back 6 years, 1 picture each year, always the same, a keychain on a hotel nightstand, the hotel logo just barely in frame. "Made it," he usually captioned it. She looked at them in a row for the first time. Something about seeing them together like that, side by side, nagged at her. The framing was identical, the angle, the keychain, almost like the same photo, reposted. Her chest tightened slowly, like a fist closing around something small. She picked up her phone, found the hotel's name from the logo, dialed the front desk. "Hi," she said, keeping her voice easy. "I'm trying to confirm that a package arrived for one of your guests. The name would be Terrence Ashford. He's checked in for the conference this week." A pause, the soft click of keys. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have any reservation under that name." Another pause. "Actually, I can check further back if you'd like. We keep records going back several years for our conference packages." "Please," Nikki said. The typing went on for a long moment. "No, nothing under Ashford, not this year, and not in our system at all." Nikki sat with the phone in her lap for a long moment. The house made its small sounds around her, the refrigerator hum, the tick of the baseboard heat kicking on. Outside, a neighbor's car started up and pulled away, and then there was nothing but silence. She did not cry. She did not call Terrence. She sat and she breathed, and she let the information settle into her the way a number settles into a column, not with feeling, but with weight, with meaning. No reservation under Ashford. Not this year, not in our system at all. 6 years. Not once. That meant the hotel in the photo wasn't where he stayed. The keychain wasn't from a check-in. It was a prop. Something he'd picked up somewhere, or ordered, or kept specifically for the yearly photo that told her everything was normal. He had taken the time to plan that detail. She stood up, went to the kitchen, and refilled her coffee. Her hands were steady. That steadiness surprised her, and then it didn't. At work, the moment she confirmed fraud, she never panicked. Panic was for people who hadn't been expecting it. Nikki, if she was being honest with herself, had been expecting something for a while now. She just hadn't let herself look directly at it. She looked at it now. She sat down at her laptop and opened a new browser tab. The conference was in Charlotte. She'd known that for years. He'd mentioned it enough times, casually, the way you mention something when you want it to sound boring. She found flights departing the following morning, 1 seat left on a 7:10 a.m. She booked it under her maiden name, Dominique Carter. 1 bag, carry-on only. She made the reservation in under 4 minutes. Then she closed the laptop, finished her coffee, and went to get dressed for work. She had a 9 o'clock call, a fraud summary to deliver, and a client who needed her to be sharp. She was always sharp. Charlotte in October was mild and gray, the sky the color of old pewter, the trees just starting to turn at the edges. Mickey picked up her rental car, a forgettable silver sedan, exactly right, and drove to the airport arrivals level with time to spare. She parked in the short-term deck with a clear sightline to the ground floor exit doors. She had a coffee from a drive-thru and her phone mounted on the dash. She wore her hair back, no earrings, the kind of plain dark jacket that disappeared in a crowd. Terrence's flight landed at 2:18 p.m. She checked the arrivals board from her phone. She waited. At 2:44, he came through the sliding doors. He looked exactly like himself. Carry-on behind him, slate gray pullover, that easy, unhurried walk that said he had somewhere to be and felt good about going there. He was smiling before he'd even cleared the curb. Nikki followed his gaze. A white Lexus SUV idled at the arrivals curb, hazards blinking. The driver's window came down, and a woman leaned out. Young, mid-20s, natural hair pulled back, wearing a camel-colored jacket. She was laughing at something before Terrence even reached the car. He did not look for a shuttle sign. He did not check his phone for a rideshare. He walked straight to her, like he'd been walking toward her for years, and tossed his bag in the back seat and got in, and that was that. Nikki gave them 40 seconds. Then she pulled out of the deck and followed. She kept 2 cars between them on the highway, 3 when traffic thinned. She'd done exactly 1 surveillance training module during a fraud certification course 4 years ago, and she remembered the core of it: distance and patience. Nothing dramatic. She was patient. They drove 22 minutes northeast of the airport, away from the hotel district, away from the convention center, into a neighborhood of newer construction. Townhouses arranged in neat rows behind a black iron fence, each unit with a small covered porch and a single-car garage. The kind of place that looked temporary from the outside, but was furnished for someone who'd settled in. The Lexus turned through the main entrance. Nikki pulled to the curb just outside the gate and watched. The SUV stopped in front of Unit 114. Terrence got out. The woman, Brianna, Nikki would learn her name later, came around from the driver's side, and she unlocked the front door herself. Her key, her door. Terrence carried his bag inside without a glance back. The door closed. Nikki lifted her phone. She photographed the Lexus's license plate, the front door, the unit number. The timestamp in the corner of the frame read 2:59 p.m. Then she set the phone down on the passenger seat. She sat with the quiet for a minute, maybe 2. The iron gate, the closed door, the ordinary street. She picked up her phone again and called her brother. He answered on the second ring. "Des," she said, her voice was even. "I need your help. I need to know exactly what I'm looking at." Desmond Carter's office sat on the second floor of a narrow brick building in a quiet part of town, the kind of street with a print shop on one end and a tax preparer on the other, where nobody paid attention to who came and went. The sign on the frosted glass door said Carter Investigative Solutions in simple block letters. No logo, no tagline, just the name. Nikki had been here twice before, both times for other people's problems. She pushed the door open at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, 2 days after Charlotte. She had her laptop bag on one shoulder and a printed folder tucked under her arm. The photos, the timestamps, the plate number written out in her own handwriting, clean and precise. Desmond was already at his desk, coffee at his elbow, reading glasses on, a spreadsheet open on his monitor. He looked up when she walked in and didn't say anything at first. Just studied her face the way he always did, measuring something. "You look like you slept," he said. "I did." "Good." He pulled off his glasses and gestured to the chair across the desk. "Sit down. Show me what you have." She laid the folder open in front of him. He went through it slowly, methodically. The plate photo, the unit number, the timestamp, the exterior shot of the townhouse. He didn't rush. He didn't react. That was the thing about Desmond. He had spent 8 years as an Army CID investigator before he built his own business, and somewhere in those years he had learned to treat information the same way Nikki treated numbers, without surprise, without drama, just weight and meaning. "Good framing on the plate," he said. I zoomed from the car. "Timestamp is clear. That's useful." He set the last photo down. "Okay. You said you want to learn how to do this, not have it done for you." "That's right." He looked at her for a moment. "Then we start with property records." He turned his monitor toward her. "Pull your chair around." The county assessor's database was public. Desmond walked her through it. Not pointing and clicking for her, but narrating, making her do the keystrokes herself. The plate number led to a registered owner, and the registered owner was not Brianna Voss. It was an LLC. Ashmont Property Holdings, LLC. The name sat on the screen like a stone. "Search the state business registry," Desmond said. Nikki typed. The filing came up in under 30 seconds. The registered agent was listed under a third-party service. Common practice, Desmond told her, for people who wanted a layer of separation. But the organizer listed on the original formation document was a name she recognized. T. L. Ashford. Terrence Leon Ashford. "Formation date," Desmond said quietly. Nikki looked at the top of the document. The LLC had been registered 4 years ago, October of that year, the same month as the conference, the same month 2 years before her miscarriage. She read the date twice, then she sat back in the chair. 4 years, not 3, not 2. He hadn't built this in the aftermath of her grief, as some kind of weak excuse she might have eventually understood. He had built it before, while she was still herself, fully herself, before the pregnancy, before the loss, before she'd started carrying the quiet weight of believing she had somehow become less than what he needed. He had already been planning this while she was happy. She felt something shift inside her chest, not breaking, but settling, like a wall coming level. "You all right?" Desmond asked. "Yes," she said, and she meant it. He showed her 2 more databases after that, a document aggregation tool and a state court records portal, both free, both public. He made her bookmark them herself. He made her run a sample search on a made-up name just to practice the steps. "You're going to use these on your own," he said. "I'm here if something doesn't make sense, but the work is yours." "Understood." "You're not going to confront him yet." It wasn't a question, but she answered it anyway. "No, not yet." He nodded slowly, like that was the right answer, but he wanted to hear her say it. "What are you looking for next?" "The money," she said. "If he's been running an LLC for 4 years, there's a financial trail somewhere. Expenses, transfers, maybe something through his company accounts." She paused. "I want to see all of it before I do anything." Desmond studied her. "That's the right order." She pulled her laptop closer and closed the county assessor's tab. Then she closed the business registry. One by one, neat, deliberate, the way she closed out a finished audit at work before starting the summary report. "I'm not filing for divorce yet," she said. She didn't look up from the screen. "I'm building a case, the same way I'd build one for a client." Desmond was quiet for a moment. "All right," he said. "Then let's make sure it holds." The house was quiet in a way it only got on weekday mornings after Terrence left for work. No television, no footsteps overhead, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Nikki's fingers moving across a keyboard. She had made coffee she hadn't touched. It sat cooling at the edge of the dining room table while she worked, both laptops open, her personal one on the left, her work machine on the right. The dining room had good light in the mornings, and she'd spread everything out the way she did when she had a complicated audit. Receipts printed and stacked, account statements in order by year, a yellow legal pad beside her right hand with a column drawn down the middle. One side, date, other side, amount. She hadn't slept much. That was fine. She'd worked through worse. She started with a joint checking account because she knew it best. She'd been managing their household finances since the 2nd year of their marriage, the bills, the tax prep, the retirement contributions. Terrence had handed it all over without argument. "You're the numbers person," he'd said, and smiled like it was a compliment. She believed that now. She pulled up 6 years of statements and began working backward, the way she always did. Most recent first, then moving into the past, the same way you'd peel back layers on a balance sheet. She wasn't looking for anything specific yet. She was just looking letting the numbers speak before she decided what they were saying. The irregularities showed up fast. In the first year, the same year Terrence had started his current job, there were 2 months where the retirement contribution transfer was short. Not by much. $200 in August, $150 in November. Small enough that she might have written it off as a rounding adjustment if she hadn't been looking with this particular kind of attention. She wrote the amounts down and kept going. By the second year, the shortfalls were larger and more consistent. By the third year, they were regular. Not every month, that would have been obvious, but 4, 5, sometimes 6 months out of 12, the transfer to their joint retirement account came in under what it should have been. The deficit would sit for a week, sometimes 2, and then a catch-up transfer would come in, just enough to keep the account from flagging a pattern if someone wasn't looking closely. Someone like a spouse who trusted the system was running the way it was supposed to. She wrote it all down. The expense reports were in a shared folder she'd set up years ago for tax season. Every year, Terrence would dump his company reimbursement summaries in there, and she'd pull the relevant figures for their return. She'd never questioned the folder. Why would she? She had set it up herself. She opened the oldest file first. Ashford T. Expense Summary, Regional Conference and Client Entertainment. The total at the bottom of year 1 was just over $18,000. That was not unusual for a regional director. She'd seen the number every tax season and never blinked. But she had never cross-referenced it against anything before. She had taken the total as given and filed it and moved on. Now she looked at the line items. Hotel charges, meals, car rentals, client entertainment, entries that listed no client name, just a category code, conference registration fees for events she now knew Terrence had never actually attended, because the front desk of the conference hotel had told her so on a Tuesday evening 2 weeks ago. She pulled up the Townhouse LLC's mortgage record. She'd found it in the county deed records database Desmond had shown her, cross-linked to the property address. The first payment had processed 4 years ago, the same month Terrence filed his largest single client entertainment charge to date, $3,100, listed under a regional dinner event, co-signed and approved by Boyd R., Regional VP, Reginald Boyd. She wrote his name at the top of the legal pad and circled it. She kept going. It took most of the morning. The coffee went cold, and she made no more. Outside, a mail truck went up and down the street, and a dog barked twice, and the refrigerator kept humming, and she kept writing. When she reached the final year, the current one, she totaled her column. She set down the pen and looked at the number. $142,400. $142,400, spread across 6 years. Some of it from company reimbursements for trips that never happened, meals that were never eaten with clients, and some of it, she had confirmed this line by line, from the gaps in their retirement contributions. Money that should have been building their future together, their security, the thing she had believed in because she had been the one managing it, and she had believed that meant she would have known. She had not known. That sat differently than the affair. The affair was a wound. This was something else. A slow, deliberate hollowing out of the ground she stood on, done carefully enough that she had never felt the floor thinning beneath her feet. She sat with that for exactly 1 minute. Then she opened a blank folder on her personal hard drive, labeled it with a date and no other identifying text, and began transferring files. That evening, she called Desmond. "Reginald Boyd isn't a bystander," she said without preamble. "His signature is on every single approval. 6 years. He knew." Desmond was quiet for a beat. "How much?" "Over 140,000. Another pause, longer this time. "Send me what you have," he said. "And Nikki, don't tell anyone else yet." "I know," she said. She already had the evidence file open. She was already adding dates. The Ashford family dinners rotated between houses, but they always felt like Yvonne's regardless of whose kitchen they were in. Tonight, it was Terrence's aunt's place, a split-level in Decatur with floral placemats and a china cabinet full of things no one was allowed to touch. Nikki had been here dozens of times. She knew where the guest bathroom was, which burner on the stove ran hot, and that Yvonne always claimed the chair at the far end of the table, the one with the clearest view of the room. Nikki arrived 40 minutes early. She pulled up to the curb, checked her mirror once, and went inside carrying a store-bought sweet potato pie and a smile that cost her nothing. Yvonne was already there, predictably, sitting at the kitchen counter with a glass of sweet tea, while Terrence's aunt, Marvell, moved around the stove in house shoes. The smell of pot roast and something buttery filled the whole downstairs. "Nikki," Yvonne looked up. Her tone was warm in the way that a wool coat is warm. It kept the cold out, but you still felt it underneath. "You're early." "I wanted to help," Nikki said. She set the pie on the counter, kissed Marvell on the cheek, and pulled a stool close to where Yvonne was sitting. Not across from her, beside her. Yvonne noticed. She took a small sip of tea. They talked the way they always did at first. Surface things. Marvell's hip, a cousin's new job, whether the weather had been too dry this fall for anyone's garden. Nikki asked questions and listened and nodded, and she let the conversation move at its own pace. She had learned a long time ago, sitting across from CFOs who were hiding things, that the best way to get information from someone was to make them comfortable first. She waited until Marvell stepped out of the kitchen to check on something in the garage. "I've been thinking about taking a little trip," Nikki said, her voice easy, conversational. "Terrence talks about that conference hotel so much. The one in Charlotte? I thought it might be nice to go sometime, check it out." She wasn't looking directly at Yvonne when she said it. She was smoothing a crease in the placemat in front of her. But she was watching. The pause was short, maybe 2 seconds, but it was the wrong kind of pause. It wasn't the pause of someone thinking of what to say. It was the pause of someone deciding how to. "That hotel is for business people," Yvonne said. Her voice had gone just slightly tighter, the way a lid goes when you've already turned it but keep turning anyway. "You'd be bored. There's nothing around there for, for a personal trip. You've been there?" "I just know the area." Quick. Too quick. "Terrence has mentioned it over the years. It's not really a destination." Nikki nodded slowly, like she was taking that in. "Sure, you're probably right." She smoothed the placemat one more time and let the subject drop. She didn't need more than that. She already knew no guest named Terrence Ashford had ever checked in there. Now she knew Yvonne knew that too. Or knew enough. Knew something she'd decided was worth protecting. The thing was, Nikki could trace the moment the comments had started, exactly when they had started. It wasn't hard. She had a good memory for timelines, for the first occurrence of a pattern. It was 18 months ago. That was when Yvonne had first said something about Nikki's weight, a soft, sideways remark about how the grief after a loss could settle on a person if they weren't careful. At the time, Nikki had absorbed it the way she absorbed most things from Yvonne, quietly, with the small, private ache of a woman who had never quite been accepted as enough. She had gone home that night and stood in the bathroom mirror for a long time. 14 months ago, it was a comment about Nikki seeming fragile still. 12 months ago, something about whether Nikki was taking care of herself during what Yvonne called, without being asked, a hard season. Every comment had pointed in the same direction. You, your body, your grief, your distance. Look here, not there. Nikki had believed on some level that the comments came from a particular kind of cruelty that Yvonne had always carried, a mother's possessiveness dressed up as concern. And maybe that was part of it. Maybe Yvonne had always looked at her that way. But the timing was not a coincidence. 18 months ago was exactly when Yvonne, by Nikki's best reconstruction of the evidence, would have learned about Brianna. She hadn't been careless with her words, she had been deliberate with them. Redirect the wife, keep her looking inward, buy the son more time. Nikki set it down in the part of her mind where she kept everything else. Clean, dated, filed. Terrence arrived 20 minutes later, laughing at something on his phone, and kissed Nikki on the cheek like a man with nothing to hide. She handed him the sweet potato pie to carry to the table. Dinner was good. Nikki ate well, complimented Marvell's pot roast twice, and laughed at the right moments. When it was time to go, she hugged Marvell. She waved to the room. She did not look at Yvonne on the way out. The idea came to her on a Tuesday morning, in the shower, the way most of her best ones did. She stood under the hot water and thought about it for a long time before she moved. She made dinner that Thursday. Nothing elaborate: roasted chicken, rice, the green beans Terrence liked with the garlic. She set the table properly, lit the candle in the center, and was already plating when he walked in from work. He loosened his tie in the doorway and looked at the table. Then he looked at her. "What's the occasion?" "Nothing," she smiled. "I just felt like cooking." He sat down. He checked his phone once before he put it face down on the table, which was more than he usually managed. She poured him water and sat across from him and let the meal settle between them before she said anything at all. "I was thinking," she said, halfway through her plate, keeping her voice light, "about our anniversary." Terrence looked up. "It's coming up in October," she said, "right around when you're usually in Charlotte. I thought, what if I came out for part of it? Not the conference part, obviously, but after. We could do something. Make a weekend of it." She watched his face move through 3 things in under 2 seconds. Surprise, calculation, and then, landing softly on the other side of both, relief. The particular relief of a man who has just been handed confirmation that his wife is not a threat. "That's a nice idea," he said. He picked up his fork again. "I'd have to check when the sessions wrap up." "Of course." She cut a piece of chicken. "Just let me know the dates when you have them confirmed. I can handle the rest. Book us something." "Yeah," he nodded, already thinking past it. "Yeah, I'll send them to you." He texted her the dates 4 days later, on a Sunday afternoon while she was at the kitchen table with her laptop open. She read the message once. She screenshot it. She saved the screenshot to the private drive she'd been building since October. On Monday, she asked him to authorize the joint card for the booking, told him she'd found a nice inn close to the city that was running an anniversary special, and that she wanted to charge the deposit before it sold out. He approved it from his phone without looking up. She documented the authorization. Timestamp, amount, his reply. Filed it alongside everything else. The deposit itself she never placed. The call happened on a Wednesday evening. Terrence was in the home office with the door most of the way closed. Nikki had been in the hallway with a basket of folded laundry, moving between the bedroom and the linen closet, quiet in her socks on the hardwood floor. She heard his voice before she heard his words, that lower, looser register he only used with certain people. Comfortable people, people he didn't perform for. She stopped outside the door. "Just need to make sure it's clean before the year-end review." A pause, then, "Reginald, I'm not asking you to do anything complicated. Keep Brianna's title where it is. Nobody's digging into that unless we hand them a reason to." Another pause, longer this time. "That's your signature on it too," Terrence said, "so we're in the same place on this." She stood still in the hallway, the laundry basket against her hip. She didn't move until she heard him shift in the chair. Then she walked quietly to the linen closet, stacked the towels, and went back to the bedroom. She wrote down what she'd heard, every word she could reconstruct, in order, with the time and date at the top. Then she called Desmond. Desmond called her back the next evening. "I found something," he said. He didn't say it like good news. He said it the way he said everything. Flat, careful, like he was handing her a tool and making sure she had a good grip before he let go. "Brianna Voss sent an email to Reginald Boyd 18 months ago. Company domain, so it's part of the record request we flagged through the audit trail. She asked him directly to move forward on the promotion. Move forward how? Her words were, Desmond said, and she heard the faint rustle of paper. Formalize the title change before Q1, so it's easier to justify why I'm always in the field with the regional team. Nikki was quiet. She knew what she was building, Desmond said. She wasn't just along for it. She drafted her own cover story and sent it, in writing to the man who signed off on it. How long ago did you say she sent it? 18 months. 18 months. The same window she'd used to measure Yvonne's comments. The same window in which an entire structure of protection had been quietly constructed around two people who had never once worried about being caught. Until now. Nikki added the call notes and the email to her file. She read through it once, beginning to end, the way she reviewed a completed audit before submission. Terrence, Reginald, Brianna. Every piece was there, every signature, every date, every word. She closed the folder. She picked up her phone. It was time to call Patrice. Patrice arrived first. She was already at the corner table when Nikki walked in, a large coffee in front of her and nothing else. No phone out, no laptop open, just her full attention, waiting. That was Patrice. She never made you explain why you'd called. She just showed up, ready. Nikki sat down and set the folder on the table between them. Patrice looked at it, then looked at Nikki. How long have you been sitting on this? A few weeks. And you didn't tell me until now? I needed to be sure it was complete first. Patrice picked up the folder and opened it. She didn't make a sound for a long time. She read the way Nikki worked, slow, careful, going back when something needed a second look. The LLC registration, the falsified expense reports, the timestamps on the townhouse mortgage payments, the authorization on the joint card, the call notes, the email from Brianna. When she got to the email, she stopped. She read it twice. She requested the promotion herself, Nikki said, in writing. Company email. Patrice set the page down with 2 fingers, the way you'd handle something delicate, or something dangerous. Nikki. Her voice was quiet. This is not just a divorce case. I know. The expenses alone, $140,000 dissipated from marital assets, co-signed by a VP. That is a dissipated assets claim that will hold up. A judge is going to look at this and see a man who systematically stole from his own household to fund a second life. She tapped the page. And she was in on the cover story. Documented. What does that do for my position? It strengthens everything. When assets are deliberately hidden or wasted during a marriage, the court can factor that into the settlement. You could be compensated for what he drained. Patrice closed the folder carefully and folded her hands on top of it. You need to be in front of an attorney. A good one. This week. Can you get me one? I already have someone in mind. The attorney's name was Sandra Keel. She worked out of a clean, quiet office on the 4th floor of a building downtown, with no magazines in the waiting room and a glass of water already on the table when Nikki sat down. Sandra reviewed the file in under 40 minutes. She didn't react the way most people would. No widened eyes, no sharp intake of breath. She moved through the documents the way a surgeon moved through a procedure, focused and unhurried. When she finished, she looked up. This is a strong case, she said. The dissipated assets alone give us significant leverage. The LLC records, the expense trail. Your husband did not hide this carefully. He hid it from someone who wasn't looking. She paused. You were looking. I was, Nikki said. The Brianna Voss material, her email requesting the fabricated promotion, that opens a separate door. It implicates her in the financial misconduct, not just the affair. The audit trail on that will likely become its own process. Sandra set her pen down. I can have papers drafted within the week. You choose when and how they're served. Nikki nodded once. I want them ready before I sit down with him. Sandra looked at her steadily. You're planning to confront him first? I'm planning to give him one conversation, Nikki said. At our house, On my terms. I want the paper served the same day. After. Sandra didn't try to talk her out of it. She simply wrote it down. The evidence file came together on a Saturday afternoon at Desmond's office, the three of them around his wide work table, Nikki, Desmond, and Patrice, the documents spread out in order of date. Desmond had printed everything. He didn't like working from screens when the stakes were this high. He told her that once. Paper doesn't crash, and paper doesn't disappear unless someone makes it disappear. So there it was, printed, labeled, sorted. LLC records, expense report, 6 years, cross-referenced against the LLC mortgage payments, the joint card authorization with Terrence's reply, the call notes in Nikki's handwriting, Brianna's email, full header intact, time-stamped. Desmond slid the final page into place and looked at Nikki. "That's everything," he said. Patrice aligned the edges of the stack and slipped it into a fresh manila folder. "Sandra has the copies. This is yours." Nikki picked it up. It wasn't heavy. That was the strange thing. 6 years of careful, deliberate deception, and it fit in a folder she could hold in one hand. She messaged Terrence that night. "Can you make sure you're home early tomorrow? I want to finalize the trip details. I've been putting together some options, and I think you'll like what I found." His reply came in 11 minutes. "Of course. Can't wait to hear it." She set the phone face down on the nightstand. Then she went to her closet and chose what she would wear in the morning. She laid it out on the chair in the corner, pressed, deliberate, exactly right. She carried the folder downstairs and set it by the front door. She went to bed early. She did not lie awake. She heard his key in the lock at 5:30. Nikki didn't move. She was already at the kitchen table, both hands resting flat on either side of the folder. The overhead light was on. The room was clean and still. There was no dinner on the stove, no wine open on the counter, nothing that would make this feel like anything other than what it was. Terrence came through the door with his jacket over his arm and his phone in his hand, already mid-thought about something else. He looked up when he saw her. "Hey," he smiled, easy, automatic. "You're already down here. Good. I'm starving. Should we order?" "Sit down, Terrence." Something in her voice made him stop. Not loud, not shaking, just flat and clear, like a door closing on a quiet hallway. He sat. He set his jacket over the back of the chair and looked at the folder between them. His face was still arranged in a pleasant expression, but his eyes had changed. Something behind them had gone careful. "What's this?" he said. Nikki opened the folder. She didn't hand it to him. She turned the first page around so he could read it from where he sat, and she let the silence do the work. It was the LLC registration. His name was not on the filing. She'd expected that. But Desmond had pulled the chain of ownership, and it ended exactly where she needed it to end. Terrence looked at the page. He didn't touch it. "That's the townhouse," Nikki said, "on Caldwell Drive. You've owned it for 4 years through a shell company." She paused. "I followed you to Charlotte last month. I watched Brianna Voss pick you up from arrivals. I have the photographs." She slid the next page across. Timestamps, license plate, the front door of the townhouse. Terrence and Brianna, together, clear as anything. Terrence's jaw tightened. "Nikki, I'm not finished." She turned to the expense reports, 6 years of them, each one flagged, each one cross-referenced against the LLC's mortgage payment schedule, a colored mark beside every charge that lined up with a payment on a property his wife had never been allowed to know about. $140,000, she said, approved by Reginald. Some of it came out of the retirement contributions. I manage our accounts. I know exactly what that money was supposed to be for. Terrence's charm was fully gone now. What replaced it was something she'd never seen on his face before, a kind of exposed blankness, like a wall with the paint stripped off. "You've been," he started. "And then there's this." She slid Brianna's email across last. She requested the promotion herself, by name, in a company email to Reginald, 18 months ago, so she could justify being around you without raising questions. Nikki folded her hands. She wasn't just someone you were seeing, Terrence. She was managing her own cover story. The silence held for a full 5 seconds. Then Terrence leaned back and shook his head, and the anger came out from behind the blankness. You want to put this all on me. Fine. But you know what you've been like since the miscarriage. You checked out, Nikki. You stopped being present. You stopped— No. Her voice was calm, quiet, absolutely certain. You don't get to use that. He blinked. I lost a pregnancy. I grieved. That is not a reason a man builds a second life before the loss even happened. She tapped the LLC document once, right on the date. This was 4 years ago, Terrence. You were already building your way out while I was still trying to build something with you. So don't sit in this kitchen and tell me you were lonely. He opened his mouth. She kept going. I'm not here to argue about what I did or didn't give you. I've spent 2 years thinking I was the reason something went wrong, that maybe I was too tired or too heavy or too far inside my own grief. Her voice didn't break, not even close. I'm done being the reason you tell yourself for your choices. Those were your choices, every single one of them. Terrence stared at her. The anger was still there, but it had nowhere to go. She hadn't given it a target. The divorce papers are already drafted, she said. They'll be served today. His face went pale. You already— Yes. He started to say something else, something about talking, about time, about giving this space to breathe. She could see him reaching for the version of himself that had always been able to talk his way back to level ground with her. She closed the folder. She stood up. The marriage ended the day you opened that LLC, she said. I'm just the one finally saying it out loud. She picked up the folder from the table. She walked out of the kitchen. She did not look back at him, sitting there. Nikki was at her desk by 7:15. She had slept. Not long, but deep, the kind of sleep that comes when something heavy has finally been set down. She woke up clear-headed, made coffee, and sat at the small desk in the spare room with her evidence file open in front of her one last time. She read through it the way she would read through any file before submitting it to a client, looking for gaps, looking for anything that could be questioned or picked apart. She found nothing. She had built it too carefully for that. At 7:42, she opened her email and composed a message to Marcus Webb. Marcus was a senior partner at Callaway & Reed, the external auditing firm that handled compliance reviews for Terrence's company. Nikki had worked across the table from Marcus twice in the last 3 years on fraud cases at her own bank. He was methodical, humorless in the best way, and he did not let things go once he picked them up. She had called him 2 days earlier to tell him what was coming. He had listened without interrupting. Now she attached the full file: LLC records, 6 years of flagged expense reports, the cross-referenced mortgage payment schedule, Reginald's co-signed approvals, and Brianna's email to Reginald requesting the fabricated promotion. She typed a short, precise cover note that named the amounts, the time period, and the individuals involved. She did not editorialize. She did not need to. She hit send at 7:49. Marcus replied in under 20 minutes. Received. Will open a formal review. Expect contact from our compliance team by end of week. She read it once, closed the email thread, and moved on. The process after that moved the way these things always moved when the evidence was clean and the paper trail was clear, steadily and without sympathy for the people caught inside it. By mid-morning, Terrence had been formally notified that his company's external auditing firm had opened an investigation into his expense account activity going back 6 fiscal years. The notification required his cooperation and placed an immediate hold on his corporate card and travel authorizations. He called Nikki at 10:18. She watched his name light up her phone screen and let it ring. At 11:30, a process server knocked on the front door of the house on Glenwood Street. Terrence signed for the divorce papers at 11:34. He called again at 11:41. She let that one ring, too. Reginald Boyd's afternoon went differently, but no better. The same evidence file that named Terrence also named Reginald, plainly, with documentation. Every falsified expense report had 2 signatures on it. Terrence's name was the first one. Reginald's was the second. 41 separate reports across 6 years. Reginald had signed every one. He was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the audit before 3 o'clock that afternoon. Nikki knew this, not because anyone told her, but because she understood how compliance reviews worked. She had built the file specifically so the investigators would have no reason to stop at one name. The trail didn't end with Terrence. She had made sure of that. The Brianna piece unfolded the way a separate thread will unravel when you pull the right one. The investigators working through the expense reports had to review every transaction connected to client entertainment and travel. When they looked at the consulting role Brianna held, the one that had been used to justify her salary and her proximity to Terrence, they found it hadn't originated from HR. It had been pushed through by Reginald at Terrence's request, with no formal job description and no position grade on file. And then there was the email. Brianna had sent it herself to Reginald's work account 18 months ago. It was archived in the company's server. She had requested the promotion, by name, in writing, and she had given her reason plainly. To make it easier to justify why I'm always around. Her words, her address, her timestamp. The investigators flagged it within hours of receiving the file. A separate inquiry into Brianna's role, compensation, and conduct was opened by end of day. Nikki did not know all of this yet. She would learn pieces of it over the following days, in phone calls from her attorney and in the dry, careful language of official notifications. But that afternoon, she was not waiting for any of it. She was at her desk working a client file she had been finishing for 3 days. A mid-sized regional manufacturer who had come to her bank for an acquisition review. There was an inventory discrepancy in the third quarter, a small one, easy to miss. She had flagged it 2 weeks ago and spent the time since tracing it back to its source. She found it that afternoon. A vendor account that didn't exist. 12 payments over 2 years. The name on the invoices didn't match any registered business in the state. She documented the pattern, cross-referenced the bank routing number, and compiled her findings into a clean summary. Her phone lit up again at 4:50. Terrence. She looked at it for exactly 1 second, then she turned back to her screen and finished the report. The audit took 4 months. Nikki knew how these things moved. She had worked inside the machinery of financial accountability long enough to understand that it never rushed and it never forgot. It simply accumulated. Document by document, signature by signature, until the weight of what had been done became impossible for anyone to carry. Reginald Boyd was the first to feel it land. When the review concluded in February, the findings were formal and specific. 41 falsified expense reports, over $140,000 in fraudulent disbursements. His name on every one. The company stripped him of his VP title and removed him from the leadership track entirely. He kept his job, technically, but the version of himself he had been building for 15 years, the title, the trajectory, the quiet prestige of being someone on the way up, was gone. He sent Terrence 3 texts in the 48 hours after the decision came down. Terrence didn't reply to any of them. Nikki's attorney told her this secondhand, and she felt nothing in particular when she heard it. It was simply the way things went between people who had only ever been useful to each other. Brianna's outcome took another 3 weeks to finalize, but the shape of it had been clear since the day the investigators found her email in the company's server archive. The promotion was voided. The decision came through HR, documented and official. The position had been fabricated, the justification fraudulent, the approval process bypassed. Her termination was for cause. Under the terms of her contract, that meant she forfeited her severance entirely. And because the termination was tied to a formal compliance investigation with a written finding attached, the flag followed her file. Every background check, every HR inquiry from any employer in the industry, it would be there. Nikki learned later, through a detail her attorney mentioned without emphasis, that during the records pull, Brianna had seen something she hadn't expected. Evidence that Terrence had structured a similar arrangement before. Not as far along, not as expensive, but the same shape, the same architecture. Brianna had told herself for 6 years that she was different, that she had been patient when other women wouldn't have been. That patience had earned her something. The records said otherwise. Nikki didn't dwell on it. It was simply information. One more entry in a file she was finished building. She visited Yvonne on a Thursday afternoon in March, unannounced. Yvonne answered the door in her housecoat, a mug in one hand, and her expression did the thing it always did when something surprised her. Arranged itself quickly into warmth before the surprise could show through. "Nikki," she said, "I wasn't expecting—" "I know," Nikki said. "I won't be long." She did not go inside. She stood at the door and looked at Yvonne clearly, the way she had trained herself to look at evidence, without flinching from what it showed her. "I know you knew about Brianna," Nikki said. "I know you knew for over a year, and I know what those comments were for. The ones about my weight, about my nerves, about what I was like since the miscarriage." She paused, not because she was searching for the words, she had them already. "You weren't worried about me. You were redirecting me. There's a difference, and I want you to know I understand it now." Yvonne opened her mouth. Nikki shook her head once, gently. "I'm not here for an explanation. I'm here to tell you that I won't be coming to family dinners anymore. Not as a courtesy, not to keep the peace. I'm just done." She said it the way she said most things now. Flat and clear, with nothing underneath it asking for a reaction. Yvonne didn't offer one, not really. Her mouth settled into something soft and sorry-looking. Her eyes went a little wet. Nikki recognized it as the performance it was and felt no pull toward it whatsoever. She said goodbye. She walked back to her car. She did not look back at the door. The divorce finalized in April. The settlement reflected the dissipated marital assets in full, and Nikki's attorney made sure the language in the filing was precise about what that meant. The judge agreed with the accounting. Nikki walked out of the courthouse with Patrice beside her and a check that represented 6 years of her financial security being quietly stolen back. She bought a house that summer. Small, clean, with good light in the morning and a back porch she had already decided she liked. She painted the kitchen herself over 2 weekends. She hung nothing on the walls that hadn't been her choice first. At work, her new firm had put her name forward for the partner track in August. The managing partner told her the decision had been straightforward. She thanked him and went back to her desk. Reginald resigned quietly in September, before the year-end review could reach him again. Terrence remained at his company in a reduced capacity. No title, no travel budget. No one above him who didn't already know what the audit had found. He was there the way a stain is there. Present, diminished, unable to be what it had once been. Brianna had left the state by fall. No forwarding address that anyone mentioned, no industry foothold left to stay for. On the first Saturday of October, Nikki set her bag by the front door and checked it against her list. Passport, itinerary, the small green journal she had bought in July and not yet written in, a paperback she'd been meaning to read for 2 years, sunscreen, her good walking shoes. She had booked the trip herself, in the spring, on a Tuesday night with a glass of wine and her laptop open on the kitchen counter, a place she had mentioned once, years ago, in passing, and Terrence had said, maybe someday, and changed the subject. Someday was October 5th. She zipped the bag closed and lifted it by the handle. The house was quiet around her. No one was waiting to see her off. She turned off the kitchen light, picked up her keys, and walked out the front door. This time, she was the one who left. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!